Hello, hello. Happy Thursday. Welcome. It is me, Joy Randall, also known as a beauty influencer, also known as Just Joy. And this is my lovely father, Mr. Aaron Randall. Hey, Mr. Aaron Randall. And this is Dialogue with the Dean, where we have about 30 minutes or so of dialogue using his wealth of knowledge and my free spiritedness. Tends to be a pretty interesting little conversation. So today is the 4th of July, and if you celebrate, happy 4th of July to you. I don't quite celebrate. Daddy, is that your thing?
Fourth,
Yeah.
you know, I'm not a big celebrator, but I'm always happy to see it.
I mean, we get a day off, right? Mm-hmm. So, So if you're into that, kudos to you. Around here, we celebrate freedom every single day, don't we? Ain't that right?
Freedom?
Well, I like to think that we do. And so today, what we want to chat about a bit is just freedom in this country. I thought that I would start off with Frederick Douglass's speech, A Nation's Story. It says, what to the slave is the 4th of July. So I'm going to read a little bit of it. I was asking you, Daddy, if you were familiar with it earlier. And you were telling me that you knew of it because it has another name, right?
The hypocrisy of slavery, was that the name of it?
I believe so.
The hypocrisy of, I think that goes by another title, The Hypocrisy of Slavery.
So, yeah. So I'm going to read a little bit of it, and this is from the National Museum of African American History and Culture, the African American Smithsonian in D.C. Why don't
you tell them about the occasion at which he delivered this speech?
Well, why don't you tell them? Because I don't
know. He delivered it up in New York, Rochester, New York, at some abolitionist convention in 1852. He addressed some convention. I can't remember the exact name of it, but it was in 1852, and it was in connection with the abolitionist movement that was going on at that time, which was a movement to legally abolish slavery here in the United States.
So this speech happened 11 years before slavery was actually abolished.
Yeah. And it was delivered on the 4th of July, Independence Day, Freedom Day. And,
welcome.
And he was addressing this notion of, you say it's Independence Day, where we celebrate freedom and independence and progress and opportunity. But what is the meaning of that to a slave? Because, black people were enslaved at that time, particularly here in the South. So I guess his notion was that this the 4th of July has no meaning to a slave.
Right.
And so you could pose the question, well, does it have any meaning for blacks today?
So can I read a bit of it?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. So, it says Douglass was a powerful orator, often traveling 6 months out of the year to give lectures on abolition. His speech was delivered at an event commemorating the signing of the Declaration of Independence, like you were just saying. Okay, so here's a little bit of it, and it says, fellow citizens, I am not wanting in respect for the fathers of this republic. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were brave men. They were great men, too, great enough to give frame to a great age. It does not often happen to a nation to raise at one time such a number of truly great men. The point from which I am compelled to view them is not, certainly, the most favorable, and yet I cannot contemplate their great deeds with less than admiration. They were statesmen, patriots, and heroes, and for the good they did and the principles they contended for, I will unite with you to honor their memory. Fellow citizens, pardon me, allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I or those I represent to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I therefore called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us? Any thoughts on that little bit?
Hmm. Well,
I could read more. Let me give you this little blurb real quick. This little blurb. I say it with a sad sense of the disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. Man, it's pretty real.
I guess it brings up this, it's just a grievance that blacks have had here in the United States over time, and I guess people of color in general, is that they weren't extended the same rights and privileges as whites were here, initially.
Still don't have it
in this country, the United States. But now I was just thinking about the end of slavery in 1865. That really changed things for African Americans and people.
In what way?
Well, they got out of that slavery business. I mean, the 14th, 15th, 16th Amendments, these were the laws that ended legalized slavery here in the United States. Prior to the passage of those amendments, slavery was perfectly legal here in the United States. It was legal to own somebody else's labor, own somebody else's body.
Do you, well, I know you and I have talked about that slavery still exists here in this country.
Well, it still exists here, yes.
I mean, not legally per se, but it still exists.
Yeah, but it's different from, back in the day, where you had agricultural slavery, and that was pretty much confined to African Americans. It was against the law here to enslave white people. It was against the law to actually enslave Indians after a while. It was only legal to enslave blacks. But 1865, the Civil War, ended slavery. And I might add, it was white people who freed the slaves,
Well, they brought the slaves here.
Oh, yeah. But they also ended it. But now and that brought about a big change for African Americans. But then you had the Jim Crow segregation era, and so blacks still weren't accorded their constitutionally guaranteed rights here. Now, they were supposed to have gotten them in 1865, but they didn't, and they really didn't get them until another big movement, the Civil Rights Movement, in the 1960s. So 1964, 1965, the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act finally gave African Americans legally their constitutionally guaranteed rights here as citizens.
Now, are you familiar with Juneteenth?
I am familiar with Juneteenth, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because even after we were freed, with the
Civil War.
Yeah, I can't remember
That
all the names.
well, yeah, even though African Americans were legally freed, they still didn't get full participation as citizens. You know, they couldn't vote. Uh, they they couldn't go to certain schools, couldn't live in certain neighborhoods, couldn't work at certain jobs and occupations.
And to me, I I just tend to see it. I try not to be a downer all the time about it, but I just see that the system is still here. We went from slavery, and yes, we were free, but then that turned into sharecropping, right?
Yeah.
And then sharecropping turned into, I guess, just black people just always being on the bottom, you know. And so when I think about freedom in this country, and what that means, I personally just, it was just never meant for us. Like, they have no intention whatsoever for us to be included in
But
this dynamic.
black people are not legally. They're not slaves anymore. They don't have that status here anymore.
But
And
are we
and
free?
nowadays, if you do feel like you were discriminated against, treated differently on the basis of your race, you can take that to court. That's illegal here now. It's against the law.
So do you think the legal system is fair?
No, no, it's not perfect, but it's. I would say blacks enjoy more the good life here now. Not all, than they did in the past. Now, nowadays, I think the thing that distinguishes people more or has the most effect on people is class, not so much race. Because a black person who is of a higher class status, let's say upper class or middle class, they have a good life here. They have pretty much the same rights and opportunities as everybody else. They can, accumulate property and so forth. But poor blacks, the people in the hood who don't get a good education, who don't learn all the social graces and so forth, you know,
Well, yeah,
we
I agree with you.
see them as suffering because of, but it's not so much because they are black, although black race and class is kind of linked here, but it's more because they are poor. It's more because they are.
Well, and a lot of people don't understand. I tend to say that again, if you don't understand the history of the country, you really don't understand what's happening even now. And black people were seen as a way to make money. Like, we weren't seen really as human beings, coming over here and, you know, we were seen as we are connected to the financial fabric of the country and what it's built on. And so that is part of the reason why the system has to continue to work a certain way. Black people will, it's hard for them to see us as equals. And that's something you and I have discussed pretty often too.
Well, black people, if you were a slave, you were somebody's property. You were a commodity. You could be bought and sold. You did not own the fruits of your labor, neither did you own your own body. You belonged to somebody else. I mean, that was the legal status of black people, until 1865, 14th, 15th, 16th Amendments. I think the 14th Amendment gave blacks their freedom. 15th Amendment gave them, well, one of them made them citizens. The other one gave them the right to vote. And I forgot what the other one did, but now today, that's illegal. But as we were saying, slavery hasn't disappeared. It exists still in.
And then the poor, Spanish people, what's going on with them right now at the borders? It's just kind of crazy.
Mm. Well, Spanish people of color here. And they got their own grievances, they got their own history here. And today you have a lot of Hispanics that are migrating up to the United States from poor, oppressed countries down in South America. So, the United States is like a magnet to them. And if I was a poor Spanish person down in Nicaragua or Colombia or, these other places that these folks come from, I would walk up to the United States too. Why live down there in a place like that when you have presumably, the richest country in the world right next door? Of course I'd go over there. Especially if I had children. I'd try to give them a better life.
Part of what Frederick Douglass says in this speech, he starts off. Oh my gosh, the thought literally just slipped my mind. I hate it when that happens. But we were talking about Spanish people and coming into this country, and he was just talking about the fact that he ran away.
He was born a slave, Frederick.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing what some people will go through to obtain freedom, and then there are some people who will just never understand. They'll never understand that side of it, the risk that people
I guess
take.
the grievance here for black people is that, this was supposed to be a country where people could be free and have independence and progress and all kinds of opportunities for success. And, that's America. That's what people believe in here. But, our grievance has always said, well, we want it too, like everybody else. And, historically, we were not extended the same rights and privileges as everybody else. And we have worked to get those. And, I would say a lot of progress has been made. Life is very different for black people here today than it was for black people 100 years ago or 200 years ago here. They had a different status back then than they do now. But I would say today, since the, 60s, civil rights, voting rights, I would say blacks have the same rights, privileges, opportunities.
I mean,
as everybody else here.
You've seen a lot change, in your lifetime. So I get that.
I think what holds people back here today is class more so than race.
But class is a direct. Class and race are directly connected.
They are here.
Like
most black people here are poor.
I hear that. I hear what you're saying, but it's like, yeah, I mean, class and race, and people tend to confuse the two, or it gets the lines get blurred, but they are directly connected.
Okay, now my example would be, now if you are a black person here and you're taking care of your education, and you've applied yourself in school, and you qualify for, jobs, positions, I think you have a good shot at them here, in spite of your race. It's not like it used to be where you would be excluded from those opportunities. You couldn't even get that kind of education because, you were not permitted to go to the best schools and so forth. But that has changed quite a bit here today.
It's changed, but if even with the same education, someone says class and race are interconnected, but we're still living in oppression despite plantation slavery ending over 150 years ago. And I definitely agree with that. If there is a white person and a black person up for the same exact job, and yes, we have different laws that are intact, but again, with what's ingrained in the psyche of the whole American structure, same education, same class background, there are going to be perceptions about a black person just based on their skin. And I would fare to say that, I mean, that's what white privilege is all about at the end
Now,
of the day.
see, there's some white people out there who would argue you up and down that black person you just described has a better shot, with what they call that legislation.
I know what you're talking about.
What is it called?
Affirmative action.
Yeah, that with affirmative action, the black person has a better shot at that job than the white person. This person would argue.
Understood. And I guess at the end of the day, we can only speak from our experiences. They'll never know what it feels like to be us, and we'll never know what it feels like to be them. So this is why the fight for reparations is very essential. I agree, but I wouldn't depend on it, and I think that reparations will require white people to deal with a level of responsibility and guilt that I just don't think as a whole is possible. It would close the racial wealth gap. Exactly. That's privilege. I mean, there's reasons why the system works the way that it does.
Well, I imagine, it's not a perfect thing, but I would say one thing you'd have to give the United States, you'd have to give the Americans credit for, is that this idealized dream of that this is a place of freedom and justice and equality. I mean, these are the things that we believe in here, that all people should be free, all people should enjoy justice, all people should be equal in their opportunities. Now, it hasn't started out that way. This started out as a country where those are only things that white men could have. But we here in America, we have worked very hard on these things. And, we've tried to make sure that the black people have those things. We've tried to make sure that women, when women weren't getting those things, that women have those things. We've tried to make sure that Native Americans have those things. We're trying to make sure that Latino Americans get those things. We're trying to make sure that gay people, transgender people get those things. That all people here are entitled to those things. And even though, our past history is not perfect, we have worked very hard on these things. You have to give America credit for that.
I give credit, as well as the American dream, in which mostly whites have benefited, Yeah. I respect that from your perspective as well, that you have seen so much change. I guess for my generation and where I stand, I mean, you've seen a black president, and we've all seen a black president.
Never thought I would see it.
Ever.
I was still shocked from it.
And again, and here we are dealing with the emotional backlash of the fact that nobody ever thought that this would happen. I mean, we talk about this all the time. That is why Trump exists.
We got,
it is payback.
That's payback for it.
And so I guess for my generation, who, we understand that there's history, we've seen, I wasn't there, but we know about Dr. Martin Luther King. We know about Malcolm X, we know about these people. And to see things reverse in real time, not even reverse, I guess just the awareness that these things still exist. Again, with the police brutality, police still killing kids in the streets. It's no different than hanging people, public killings. It's very disappointing to think that, oh my gosh, we've supposed to have come so far. And then to see that, we still struggle with some of the very same challenges, that we always have. since we've gotten here.
But you see that in American history. If you look back in American history, every time black people have made some progress, there's always been a backlash. Like after, slavery ended, there was a backlash there. They instituted Jim Crow and segregation. And then after Jim Crow and segregation ended, there was a backlash. You had Nixon and Nixon getting into the presidency and law and order, and it was just a coded thing for controlling black people and policing black neighborhoods and so forth. And then we had Obama become president, and now we're suffering the backlash of having Trump, white nationalist, as the president. So historically, that's the way it has worked here. A group like African Americans who've always campaigned for progress and change, every time they get a step forward, there's usually followed by a couple of steps back. So
three steps forward?
This is part of the historical cycle, what we're going through right now.
Yeah, and I guess that for someone who has been around for years, it's easier to take in and deal with,
But black people have the vote now. We have the vote.
Well,
so
this
guy
I don't believe in
that we're
politics
troubled
anymore.
by, your boy Donald, we can vote that chump out of there in the next election if we get organized and exercise our vote. We get rid of this guy.
He says white nationalists have always been around, but Trump brought them out the closet. Absolutely. And I guess it's just scary sometimes to know that you're walking around with people who everything's fine as long as black people stay in their lane. It's definitely been a challenging realization for me, especially working with different people, again, on the same class level or maybe at times lower than I could perceive at the time. And when you start, it's almost like they cannot believe at times that, like, wow, this person has more education than me, this person has a different financial structure than me, I'm white and they're black. That's when you start seeing it come out. And that's just the truth. I wish that wasn't the case, but it is. State and local politics is where we need to place our votes. Yeah, I can agree with that. State and local politicians have more power than Congress and the president. I definitely think that black people, we have to educate ourselves more on politics in general. We tend to be so jump on the bandwagon. I've talked about, self-worth. I think that that's what social media provides, is like this emotional feeling that, my decisions matter. And we love to jump on a bandwagon, but I don't know if we're always educated genuinely about how to really make a difference, And I've definitely tried to have conversations at times where I have experts come in, but again, if it's not popular, they don't show up for the conversations. So it's interesting a lot of times to me, and I'm sure you probably wouldn't agree with this, but that slave mentality, that dehumanization is still, deeply ingrained within us. So I use a hashtag at times to say, free yourself. Free yourself. You just have to know you matter, period. It's not about whether white people think you matter or anybody thinks you matter. You have to matter to yourself. That's the way I think of it. Well, any last thoughts, words? It's 1:30.
No, I've enjoyed our conversation.
Well, great. We have been grilling all summer long, so Well, thank you. You said it's a great discussion. Thank you very much. Feel free to ask questions. We appreciate your comments. We appreciate you joining us. We try to do this weekly on Thursdays at 1 p.m. as life permits. But yeah, we've been grilling all summer, and so we're not gonna be grilling anything today. I'm just gonna probably cook some regular chicken. But I hope that everybody else, is at the barbecue, having a cocktail, having a cold one, and enjoy yourself. Enjoy your day off. So we normally do our handshake. It's kind of weird to do it from this side. Let's see.
Enjoy the 4th of July. Wait.
All right. Well, this is Dialogue with the Dean, and enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you next time. Bye.